Welcome, everyone, to the Brand Fortress HQ podcast. I'm your host, John Stojan. I'm thrilled today to have Bradley Sutton with me. He is the Director of Training and the Chief Evangelist at Helium 10. Bradley is best known for his role at Helium 10, the software solution that serves over a million Amazon sellers. But what you might not know is he's also has over 20 years of experience in e-commerce, where he's launched over 500 products on Amazon himself. And then also, while at Helium 10, that being his day job, he still actively sells on Amazon, Walmart, eBay, Etsy, and other platforms. And he also has his own podcast, the Series Seller podcast, where he has over 4 million downloads. So, Bradley, I'm just super excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
So, folks that are very familiar with the Amazon community probably have heard listened to your podcast, are familiar with you. Many of them probably use Helium 10. So before we kind of dive into some of the different ways you can use Helium 10, some of the different things that you're seeing in the Amazon ecosystem right now, can you give people a little bit of background on you that may not be familiar and kind of know your origin stories of how you got to Helium 10?
Yeah, so I live a long and colorful history as it comes to hobbies I've had and jobs. I've done everything from being a sumo wrestler to being a international traveling Zumba fitness YouTube influencer and everywhere in between. Like complete opposites. I always like doing weird things. I live in California and I used to have pigs and goats. I'm just like trying to march to the beat of a different drummer. But how I came into Helium 10's radar is for years I was working kind of like in e-commerce companies, but more like .com. And then I split with this one company I was working with who were selling. They just started selling on Amazon a lot, and I didn't know anything about Amazon in those days outside of what my part of the business was, which was I was kind of like the guy to send all the inventory, and I was shipping stuff and packaging, fulfilled by merchant, and sending FBA orders and things like that. But when I split with them, like I really didn't know the nitty gritty of Amazon, listing
so
optimization, keywords.
You weren't even the marketing guy. You were just the,
No,
hey, let's make sure these things are fulfilled.
I was kind of like the money guy. It was with foreign people, so like everything had to be in my name. So like that was my contribution to the company. And I had bought a house, which I still live here, that has a 2,000 square foot warehouse. And so at the time, what we did was we made the warehouse, the company warehouse, and then I moved back in with my parents, and then we made the house an office for the company. So that was like my contribution, and I was kind of like the warehouse guy. It was pretty big, like we were at one point we were selling like maybe 1,000 units a day of products and stuff. But my business partners really didn't tell me much of the other side. The PP, I didn't know what PPC was or anything. And then so after I split them, I was like, hey, I don't know what I want to do, but this Amazon thing doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that there's some potential here. Like I was doing fulfilled by merchant and packaging sometimes 500-600 fulfilled by merchant items a day using this machine. I could do that in like 2 hours. But I'm like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that, hey, this is pretty cool. That, these guys might not even know all of what they're doing and we can be so successful. So I was like, let me go to a couple conferences and see what Amazon's about. And that's what kind of like opened my eyes to like the whole Amazon ecosystem. I'm like, yo, this is where it's at. And so that's where I kind of like dedicated myself. But I skipped right to becoming a consultant. Like I didn't sell myself. I became an expert in launch and became a consultant for my old business partners because they really didn't know what they were doing. and then I just started getting, through word of mouth, started getting a lot of clients. I wasn't even using Helium 10 in the beginning. And I was using other tools and I didn't like them. And I was like, hey guys, the keyword tracker I'm using sucks. Like this is terrible. And they've got terrible customer service. Can anybody recommend like a decent keyword tracker I should use? And somebody, it's like in 2016, maybe was like, hey, you tried Helium 10. I didn't even know really about Helium 10. So I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. And I was like, whoa, this software is amazing. They got all other stuff too. And I started using it a lot. And then I would go into their Facebook group and I would always like argue with, I like debating. I would always argue with people who are giving false information and stuff. And then the owners of Helium 10 were like, who's this guy? Like let's invite him in. And then I started working for Helium 10. The rest is history.
Nice. Well, I do have to ask this because I can't let it go. So how did you go from sumo wrestling to Zumba fitness to e-commerce? Like what did those first two, how did those lead to even
Yep.
e-commerce?
So this the sumo part of things was I live in I've always gone to Japan. My dad had a business there ever since like the Vietnam War, like before I was born, and so we'd always go there. And I even lived in Japan when I was little for like 3 years, and so I love sumo wrestling, like as a fan. And then when I was in my adult life, live in my 20s, living in LA, I found that I was like, wow, there's a sumo club. So I was like, this is amazing. I could like live my dream of being a sumo wrestler. I didn't even know there's a such thing as amateur sumo and stuff. So I did that, and I got pretty good. Like one time I was like number 3 in the United States for my weight class. And so I just loved it. And but then I had to in amateur sumo wrestling, there's weight classes, like I just said. So I would keep my weight high at a certain level because I didn't want to, like boxing and wrestling, I didn't want to go against somebody, you know, bigger than me. So what happened was that wasn't a healthy weight for me, and the doctor was like, "Hey, you need to like lose some weight." And that was when I went to the gym. I'm like, "All right, what what is Zumba?" This is before Zumba was a household name. I just saw it on the schedule. I'm like, "What in the world is this weird word?" And I went in there and I was like, "Oh, amazing music," and like 50 beautiful women and 2 dudes. I'm like, "Hey, this is the spot for me." So I started doing it, and I was like, I can. They were like, "You should become an instructor." I'm like, "Nah, I'm good." But they convinced me that I just always am thinking about marketing, and I always have that entrepreneurial spirit. So then I started making YouTube videos, and this is before like YouTube was a thing. It's like 10, 15 years ago, and it got big. I got tens of millions of views, which like today would be like billions of views probably, but or hundreds of millions of views. But it yeah, I started doing that for years until I tore my Achilles tendon playing basketball, and I couldn't do Zumba anymore, and that was kind of like when I started working for Helium 10. But I've always kind of been an entrepreneur and always kind of had things to do with e-commerce. Like the first Fast and Furious movie that came out. I was working for a .com company that was into the carbon fiber hoods and exhaust and intakes and things like that. So yeah, my e-commerce career started like in the '90s. That's how long I've been kind of in and around it.
Okay. Wow. And how do you feel like some of those early experiences? Because I know now one of the things that I appreciate, especially about the content that you put out, is that you do a lot of experiments, which I think is fantastic because um, you know I, I've been involved with Amazon since kind of 2017, 2018. So not nearly as long a track record as you have, but I still hear a lot and have seen it change a lot where Amazon has got more competitive. And I hear it from a lot of people. They're like, oh, well, the opportunity on Amazon is dead. Like, it's so hard to launch products. It's so hard to do this. And this is now so much more expensive. So I just appreciate the content that you create about,
Thanks.
okay, launching in 2024, what does that look like? How is it different? How is it the same? That type of stuff. So how do you feel like those early experiences kind of helped you or keep you open to all the changes as they happen in e-commerce?
Yeah, it's important because even obviously the .com industry, since I was in it, had its ups and downs, and I guess that kind of like taught me you can't, when you're talking about e-commerce, I don't care if it's Amazon or off Amazon, it is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Something could be absolutely working right now, and then a year from now, you're gonna have to completely pivot. That was what they were doing, like phone cases back in the day, and they really didn't know what they were doing. They went from selling 1,000 a day, within a year or two, to like selling like 50 a day, because they didn't keep their strategies, up to date, and they had to like switch industries because then they just let other people get too much market share, like the Spiegans. They were around before Spigen and Caseology and those other like very popular phone case companies now. They could have been that if they would have, kept innovating and staying at the top of things. And so that's like the main thing that I think is a constant in the e-commerce is you have to be always on the lookout for the changes that are happening, whether we're talking about algorithmic changes, whether we're talking about buyer behavior, profitability, logistics. Nothing stays the same. I mean, one week everything is great. The next week there's COVID, right? One week everything is great. The next week a ship is blocking the Suez Canal for a month. Like anything can change at any aspect in this, and so you always have to make sure that you're up to date with what is changing and you're adapting your business for that. I think people nowadays realize that the whole mindset of laptop lifestyle and you go set up your store and it'll be an automation and you just go kick it on the beaches of Hawaii or something. Like, people understand that that's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. But at the same time, they might understand that, but they're not really down and dirty into what is changing and adapting as quick as they should. So a lot of things, yes, are harder today than it was, but then also a lot of things are easier. To be honest, like you can't just throw some phone cases up and sell 1,000 a day like we did, because things are more competitive. But at the same time, the amount of data that Amazon sellers have today is just like ridiculous. Not just on the tool side. I mean, Helium 10 didn't even exist in 2015. Like, obviously everything that Helium 10 has now is just like, if you were to take a time machine and show a seller, then they would be like, that is not real. There's no way that I can click a button and know how, all the keywords that a product is ranking for. Get out of here. Forget about Helium 10. Let's just think about, if a Helium 10 didn't exist or any other tool, the stuff that Amazon is providing is ridiculous, like brand analytics and search query performance, the kind of things that power Helium 10, a lot of this data. These are the things that in 2016, 2017, people were paying like $10,000-$20,000 for these black hat reports to get like other people's data and stuff like that. They were paying, like, bribing Amazon employees.
I was gonna say,
What
yeah,
is available nowadays is better than that stuff. So yes, things, our PPC is more expensive and there's more competitors, sure. But for every little thing that is more difficult, there's also something that we didn't have like 4 or 5 years ago that makes our job a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, a couple of things there is that first is that, if you're looking for that laptop lifestyle and, quote unquote passive income where, you're just going to launch a couple of products, get some traction, and then go retire onto the beach, then, Amazon is probably not for you. But on the plus side, if you're interested in building a real brand, there's a ton of opportunity on Amazon and even beyond that, still in e-commerce. And I think, the other thing that you said that is super important for brands that I don't think they take enough advantage of, which is whether you're selling on Amazon or off Amazon, the amount of data that Amazon gives you on who's buying your product, what keywords are they using, how well are those converting. You can't find that data anywhere else in the ecosystem. Yep. And just because you have that data on Amazon, most of those trends, well, the size of traffic and that type of stuff might be smaller in other platforms, at least from what I see. A lot of those trends hold true on other platforms and other places where you're selling. So you can use that data in order to be successful in other places in your business and really understand your customer at a much, much deeper level than you can if you didn't have that data from Amazon.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned one thing about, kind of all these changes. I'm curious because, you've seen a lot of these changes. How do you think about that? Because it seems like, there's probably, I see at least 2 to 3 things a week that come out from Amazon, whether it be on the ads platform or how things are shipped or those types of things, where I think for a lot of sellers and a lot of brands, it's hard to keep up. So how do you think about prioritizing, hey, which of these changes am I going to really dive into, and what things can I just kind of, it's great to know that that's there. But maybe that's just something that I don't, I can kind of put on pause for right now, and what to focus on.
I think it's different for different people. There's no one right answer to that. Like the wrong answer is, oh, I'm just gonna, stick my head under the sand and not implement anything. I draw the line somewhere that maybe somebody else doesn't draw the line. For example, I'm old school when it comes to my PPC. I don't do like the bid modifiers, like, hey, increase my bid 75% if I have a high. I'm like, I actually don't want the Amazon algorithm like trusting it. If I have the ability to say no, I'm not going to rely on the Amazon algorithm. I am 10 out of 10 always going to choose that, because I don't.
You don't
trust
think that Jeff Bezos has your best interest at mind?
No, we know that things sometimes don't always go perfectly, especially on the advertising side. So like, that is technically a new feature that Amazon has, but I'm not adopting it. So like, I don't think that it's just, every single new feature that comes out, you absolutely should implement it, or else you're kind of falling behind. Now, something like search query performance, brand analytics, if you're not using that data, I think you're absolutely being left behind. That's like a that's like a factual thing. It's not something that you're actively using that there's, oh, is this valuable or not, or could this go wrong? No, you're just looking at data, and that is just mind-blowing data where I can look at the keyword level and know how many searches there were that are denormalized according to Amazon, and then how many impressions products had, how many times people clicked on products, how many times people clicked on my products, how many people added it to the cart, and then how many people ended up purchasing with a 24-hour period. I mean, there is no scenario where that is not valuable data to somebody. So it's just a matter of like, all right, look at the things that can definitely give you your business value, like search query performance, like product opportunity explorer, like Helium 10. We're always innovating, new things. We don't do stuff just for the heck of it. Like, we do stuff because customers ask for it, or because we genuinely think, hey, if you implement this new feature, your business is going to be helped. But some of the things that Helium 10 or Amazon offers, it might not be for everybody. Like, we might make something that's kind of like maybe more geared towards a wholesale seller, or a merch by Amazon, seller. Like, we make something on the listing optimization side. A wholesale seller could care less about that. Like, they're not even editing listings. So, like, don't take the time to watch my podcast. If you're a wholesale seller, don't listen to my 1 hour podcast on our new listing builder score, because that's useless, to you. So focus on the things that are definitely going to help your business grow, is kind of like my philosophy.
Okay. So just putting through that filter of like, hey, does this apply to me?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think on the face of it maybe seem a little bit obvious, but I mean, I feel it as someone that, helps Amazon brands and talks with a lot of Amazon brands of all these changes coming out and kind of feeling overwhelmed by everything. But if you put it through that filter of like, okay, does this, as a brand or as a seller, does this apply to me? I feel like probably half those changes, either don't apply or probably don't have a massive impact.
Yeah. Like,
Um,
is it just a shiny new thing that like sounds cool if I use, or do you really see right through the value of it? And yeah, the fact is that not every new thing that Amazon or Helium 10 or any company comes out with is 100% applicable to you. But if you have to, and if you have to think long and hard about how it can help you, yeah, and you don't have that much time, yeah, probably move on. But if you look at something new, or you read one of those releases on Seller Central, and you're like, oh my goodness, I've been wanting something like this forever, that's probably the thing you should double down on. But if you have to think like, I wonder how this can, oh, what, no, you're like, nah, skip it.
all right. Well, and you brought up something really important that I feel like everybody's aware of what it is. I don't feel like, for whatever reason, enough sellers use it on a regular basis in order to get value out of it, which is when we talk about data-driven decisions, that search query report, especially
Mhm.
now that, you can not only look at it at the brand level, but your actual, ASIN level data. What do you think um, brands or sellers out there kind of miss out of that report? Or where do you think the biggest opportunities are in that?
Well, I think just, it sounds dumb, but like, one of the biggest things is just using it. I think everybody has been in there, but then the problem is, until it becomes available in the API, and then tools like Helium 10 can provide it in a more easy to consume manner, I think some people are just like not looking into it as much as they should, because it's so tedious. Like, all right, I got
Yeah.
to go to my ASIN level, and then I got to go week by week and week, and then let me click on each keyword and see. I mean, like, it's really tedious unless you're like an Excel wizard, and you know how to do data warehouses, and you import everything, and going to create some pivot tables and some V lookups, and this and that. It's kind of hard to deal with. So, but inside of there, it's the easiest benefit that somebody can get from search tree performance is trying to see what you have a good conversion rate on compared to your competitors. You can see what the overall conversion rate for a keyword is. And again, this, just to keep in mind, this is not 100% of the picture. What you see in search tree performance is maybe only 30%, if that, of all the purchases, because it's kind of limited with what it's showing, because it has to have happened in the 24-hour period, and you can't have clicked on a sponsored brand ad in this or that. And so if you actually compare the purchases, that's showing there to your sales, you're like, wait a minute, this is completely wrong. No, I sold 5,000 units. How come it only shows me 900? Well, it's apples and oranges, but still, it's still valid. It's still good information. But the thing that I think is the best is looking at where your conversion rate is better, and then check, going back to Helium 10, and then checking like keyword tracker, for example. All right, where am I historically in my sponsored ads in my organic rank? And then you're like, wait a minute, my conversion rate is like 50% better than everybody else, but I'm showing up in sponsored ads mainly on page 2. My organic rank is in the bottom of page 1. All I have to do is help increase my organic rank and show myself at the top in sponsored ads, and I'm going to crush it because my conversion rate is better. So before, in the old days, before search keyword performance, you just like, all right, I think this keyword is important to me, and I think I'm very relevant to customers. I'm just going to bid high on all my important keywords and like hope I get sales. But now it's like, no, maybe if your conversion rate is worse than your competition, I'm going to dial back spend, and I'm going to save some money because I'm like, no, something's wrong. I got to figure out why customers are not converting on this. So that's just one simple thing that you have never, ever, ever had visit, even in Helium 10 or in Seller Central. This data has never been available. So if people are going to do one thing with search keyword performance, is check your purchase to click ratio compared to the overall keywords purchase to click, and then double down on the ones that you're doing well on.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. There's probably, 20 other things that we could talk about with Search Query Report that you could do, because it does such a great job of showing the full funnel, everything from impressions to how many sales are you getting compared to, the entire category for that specific keyword. But I think, like you said, just keeping with, hey, look to see where you're at with your conversions and how does that compare in Helium 10 to what you're advertising, to see where you're at.
Yeah.
So with that said, I think that's an important data point. Is there anything else that you can think of off the top of your head, when you think of data-driven decisions, whether it be on, Amazon or even within Helium 10, that's maybe one data point that, you're like, I've been beating this drum for a long time, but I still feel like it gets missed a lot and is a big opportunity for sellers?
Yeah, I would say the number one slept on metric in Helium 10. It's been there for years, and it's near and dear to my heart because I'm the one who discovered it like 5 years ago. I discovered this data point in Amazon where before, what it had to do, and by the way, spoiler, is called Amazon recommended rank. It's a little known column inside of Cerebro, which everybody uses Cerebro. I would say 99.9% of Helium 10 users do not look at Amazon recommended rank. It's has nothing to do with Helium 10. It's not a calculation. It's not an algorithm. It's not an estimate. It literally is pulling from this data point in Amazon, where before it was mainly to show what Amazon thought that you should advertise for if this was your product. And the crazy thing is you can see it for anybody's product, exactly what that person in Seller Central is seeing, and it scores it as far as what Amazon thinks is the most relevant. And now it's actually changed over the years more into a metric that really shows the relevancy of a product, or what Amazon's algorithm thinks a product, how relevant it is to a certain keyword. I'm sure you've seen this a billion times, where you make a new listing and start your PPC campaigns, and maybe you're not even indexed for the keyword. And I don't mean ranking, but index. You've got the keyword in your listing, you're not indexed, or you can't get, maybe you are, but you can't even get a PPC impression. You got this keyword in your title, like, what's going on? This is what my product is. How am I not getting impressions in PPC? And you kind of know the reason. Well, Amazon must not think it's relevant, but you never had a way really to predict what is the situation. So, but if you look at the Amazon recommended rank, the number one means the keyword that Amazon most thinks is relevant. And if it has a number of like 150, that means in the scoring system that Amazon has, it's the 150th most relevant term. And so if your number one keyword has a rank of like 25 or 50 or 75, then it's like a sign that, hey, Amazon is confused about your product. It doesn't really know what it is. Maybe it's because you're in the wrong category. Maybe you don't have that keyword in phrase form enough. Whatever the case is, you're going to have a heck of a time ranking for that keyword when Amazon doesn't think you're very relevant. So what I suggest to everybody is, hey, you ever have trouble ranking on a keyword or getting PPC impressions, or just like I actually teach people now, before you even make your real listing, burn a UPC code, make a fake listing, FBM, just so you can
Mhm.
make it active, and then run it through Cerebro. And you could do this within like 24 hours of having it. It's like a live feed from Amazon. It takes Amazon a little bit to populate it, but then you can instantly see with no activity on the listing what Amazon thinks it is. A good example of how valuable this could be is I was doing a case study earlier this year where I was selling some socks that had a message on it. Now these were just regular socks, but on the bottom it says, "If you can read this, bring me coffee." So a lot of the main keywords for this product is like coffee gifts for women. If you can read this, bring me coffee socks. So like people actually search for that stuff.
Mhm.
When I ran it, I couldn't get impressions though for anything with coffee in it. I'm like, this is like, it's literally 7 places in my listing. It's in my title. I mean, this is the main thing. But then if you think about it, it's like, well, wait a minute. Coffee is like a grocery keyword. And then
Yep.
socks are obviously in the clothing category. So Amazon must not have completely tied it together that, hey, this is what this product is. I threw it into Amazon recommended rank, all the top 50 keywords, just like black sock, pink sock, sock for home, and nothing coffee related. So it was like, okay, I haven't set enough of those relevancy signals to Amazon to let it know that this is an important keyword. And so again, this is something that before you were just guessing, but if you look at Amazon recommended rank for any of your products, you're going to get some insights into what Amazon thinks your product is.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, first of all, just looking into that is so powerful. But then the other thing is, the principle that I take away from that is understanding how Amazon views your product is super important. I've talked with a number of people, and I'm sure you have as well, where they're really struggling with a product, or really it could even be their whole brand. And what it comes down to is that they're essentially fighting upstream against Amazon,
Yeah.
where they're just not set up to work with Amazon. And it causes a lot of headaches. And that's a perfect example of, hey, if you're not even, Amazon's not showing you as relevant, it's going to be really hard for you to rank for that keyword. And you've got to change something, like you said, on your listing, your category. There's a handful of ways that I know how to fix that. And I'm sure you probably know a few more, but you got to figure out a way to make that connection for Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So that's a really good one. And I think that's a good point so talking about data-driven decisions, the other thing that you had on here that I think is really important is what are your recommendations for sellers and brands out there? They're looking at the data, they're testing different things, they're trying to push, this product forward and brand forward. But for whatever reason, what they're doing isn't working. At what point, um, let's take like a product, for example, because I think that makes it a little bit easier. Um, what would be your recommendation on when they should be start to pivot and think about pivoting to different strategies or even a different product?
Yeah. Yeah. That's another, I think, definitely mistake that people make sometimes. They get very emotionally attached to products, and then that's when you stop, when you stop making data driven decisions. Yes, you can't just think only data. You got to think of the emotions behind buyer behavior and things like that that really can't be explained through data. But at the same time, you got to know when to pull the plug. Some people pull it way too late. Some people pull it too early. Like I have this case study I'm doing right now. A lot of people know about the Project X coffin shelf that we launched years ago in our case study on YouTube, and it was the number one coffin shelf for years and just kind of like died away a little bit. Part of it was our fault. Some of our people who are in my account doing tests, they screwed up one of the PPC campaigns and nobody knew about it, and then like we never like recovered from that. They stopped advertising our main keyword, coffin shelf. I'll never forgive those guys. But anyways, regardless of what the reason is, it's kind of been dead for like a year, like selling 1 a day or 2 a day. Something that used to sell 20 a day. And so could I have pulled the plug? Yes, because like part of the reason was also competition came in. I used to sell this thing for $30, and competition is coming in at selling for $20, which I'm not going to do. But I had to lower the price like 24, 25 just to at least stay somewhat relevant, and that's very near my break even point. So at the end of the day, what you decide to do should be about profitability. It's not based on emotion, but it's like, all right, if you're losing money on this product or breaking even, it's not worth your time. You got to cut it. But the problem is that some people just do that instantly when they see it. And that I think is a little bit too quick. You got to ask yourself, have you done everything you can to make sure that it's just not viable? So like right now, I'm not sure what the answer is for my coffin shelf, but I'll tell you what I did. I did a research into the niche and I went into people's reviews. I'm like, wow, everybody is kind of like buying either like these little mini pumpkin as a decor for this thing, or like skulls, like all these creepy people buying this product. I can't even understand them anyways, but I'm like, I could clearly see that. And also at the same time, I was looking on research, on product research, and I found something completely unrelated. It was heart-shaped gift boxes, like a gift, like an empty box that was somewhat fancy, not like a brown cardboard box, but it was like white or red and shaped like a heart. And people were just buying these. It's like $17 for a gift box shaped like a heart. And I'm like, all right, this is what I'm going to do for the coffin shelf. I'm going to give it one more try. I'm not going to pull the plug yet. I'm breaking even. I'm not losing money, but let me invest more money into the product. Let me find a couple of those trinkets that people are already buying to put in there that cost me maybe 20 cents each. So it's not adding too much. And instead of just doing a regular cardboard box that probably cost me 20 cents each, let me invest in $1.50 or $2 custom coffin shaped spooky looking box that now becomes like a product. It's what the package is packaged into, but it's also a standalone product that has value. We're like, hey, use this coffin gift box to gift something else, or use it as your sock storage for your spooky socks or whatever. So now I'm in the middle of like a relaunch where I'm like, all right, I'm going to start low with the price, but let's raise it up. And can I go back to selling this for like $32, $33? Everybody's still selling their coffin shelves for $20, but can I get some traction back? Because I'm offering all these other things that nobody's going to take the time like me and compete against. I'm sourcing this from like 3 different factories. Coffin shelf is not a big enough market for the maybe factories who are competing with me to go and try and copy what I'm doing. Right. So is it going to work? I don't know. It's working pretty good so far. I was able to boost up the keyword rankings and things like that. But if it works, it's great, because now all of a sudden I added $2 of cost, but I was able to add like $10 to my retail price. And so now I'm going to be profitable again. But at this point, if it doesn't work and people are just like, no, we just want the $20 coffin shelves. Well, again, I'm not going to play the race to the bottom game. I'm going to have to pull the cord, even though this is like a very sentimental value product because it was what we started our case study on. I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug if it's not ready. But that to me is like a process that people should take. Follow the data. Don't just give up at the first sign of adversity. Do some research. Is there something you can do that could possibly work? And then if that doesn't work, move on to something else.
Well, yeah, so many good things in there. I mean, the first thing is on an emotional level, I hope it does work out, because I've been hearing about these coffin shelves for years. So I would be very sad to see them go.
Yeah, right.
I'm also really curious as to, after talking about that kind of that first year, how many coffin shelf competitors you ended up with.
Well, it's funny because there's people, I mean, it's the saturated niche now. There's like 20, 25 people trying to sell the same thing. One guy came up to me, might have been at the Prosper show or Sell and Scale event, I'm not sure where. But he was like, man, I actually launched a brand almost the same as the Manning's Mysterious Oddities. And it's, I think he's like one of these guys. I think I might know who he is. I think he's one of the ones who did like the coffin makeup shelves and stuff. And he built $1 million brand around the idea of Project X. So that to me is not, I don't get mad at that. First of all, Project X is not my account. Like I run it 100%, but Helium 10 pays for it and they keep all the profits, et cetera. And we use it for testing. So it's like, it's not bad that he stole market share from me. That to me is a lot better than me still being the number one coffin shelf, to know that that thing inspires somebody to build $1 million brand. It's kind of like crazy to even think about.
Yeah, that is really cool. And you got to respect Gabe, somebody puts that amount of effort. I'm sure that he put a ton of effort into building that $1 million brand. So the other thing that I think that really stands out to me that I think is a great point, and I'm curious whether, it works out perfectly in this situation or not, because I think a lot of sellers are feeling the pain of this of, okay, well, now I've got competition from Chinese sellers, and maybe it's, even within the United States or around the world of people selling on Amazon US, there's just a lot more competition. in the last couple of years than there was previously. And you really do have to be on your game. So I just love that as a very tangible example of how you did some deep research into looking at the particular customer base, looking at those reviews, figuring out a way to add value where, yeah, it costs you a couple extra bucks, but it also allows you to charge, $10 more than
Yep.
most everybody else in the marketplace, which in
Yep.
itself sets you apart. Like, why is this
Yep.
product $35 and that product is $20? If you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
the same
Mm-hmm.
ones on page one, I think there are enough people on Amazon that want to buy a good product
Yeah.
that are going to look at that and say, okay, there's enough value here that I'd rather have the $35 product.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so,
Yeah, there's somebody I had on the podcast a while back, Ann Ferris. She has like a baby brand, and she was talking about she actually goes into launching new products and she wants to be the most expensive, because you think about people buying stuff for their babies, it's like, do you want to be known as the cheap parent who are like trying to cut corners and like get something that might not be great quality for your newborn kid, or do you want to be known as the parents like, no, I get my kids the best? So like, that's what I think some Amazon sellers need to get out of their mindset, where it's like, no, Amazon is a price war. And sure, in some cases it is. If you're selling garlic presses or something that there's no innovation, or the quality is all the same almost no matter what, maybe it is a price war. Phone cases is another example. But don't get in price wars, guys. I never want to compete in those markets where it's dictated by just who's the lowest cost. Sometimes go for niches where you can come in as a higher price one, and it actually works out better for you.
yeah. Well, the other thing that I think is interesting out of that is that, this whole goth decor, unless I misunderstood you, sounds like it's not like something that you are deeply into where, like goth decor is really your hobby, but you just saw an opportunity there and, you have a brand based on that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be your passion in life in order to be successful in a category to sell a product successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that's really important. Like, I love Gary Vee. Actually, he was doing a meet and greet here in my neighborhood. Like, I couldn't even believe it. I live in the middle of nowhere, and he was going to a local yogurt shop, and I went there and fanboyed out. But one thing that he says that doesn't apply, in my opinion, to Amazon sellers is like, you can't really just do what you're passionate about. Like if you're going to become a YouTuber or something, yeah. If you're passionate about sports, you're not going to be successful talking about true crime. If you don't care about it, you're going to be more successful as an influencer if you're talking about sports. But in Amazon, it's not like, oh, I'm passionate about water bottles. I'm an expert on water bottles. Let me go ahead and make a water bottle brand and I'll be successful because I'm passionate. No, because it's saturated, right? But you have to make yourself passionate about whatever you do decide. So when you decide what product you're going to go with, you got to take passion out of it. But then when you're all in on that product, now you make it your passion. It is almost against my morals to sell coffin shelves. Like, it's a little bit disturbing. Like, I don't understand the kind of person who'd want that in their house. But guess what? So I was not passionate about it at all. Guess what? I'm now probably one of the world's top 10 experts on the kind of person who would buy a coffin shelf, because I made myself passionate about it. Because you're not going to be successful if you kind of have this I don't care about what I'm doing attitude about your products. And I say that it's extreme. Of course, there's people who are not passionate about what they sell. Somebody who's selling screws and nuts and bolts or whatever. Sure, I know this is not a blanket statement, but just a way to help give you an advantage or to help set you up for success. Get passionate about the product that you're selling, even if it is nuts and bolts or a screwdriver or something. Like, know everything you can about who would buy that and what kind of features that kind of your customer avatar is looking for, and that's going to make you a more successful Amazon seller. But don't go into your product research saying I'm only going to focus on this kind of product because that's the kind of products I like to buy. Could you miraculously find something that just happens to be a huge opportunity and you're passionate about? Sure, but that's like 1% of the time it's going to be like that. 99% of the time, the product that you're going to see demand on and where there's room for you is probably something that you might not have never even heard of before you found it in Helium 10 or in Seller Central or something.
Yeah. And I think that's what it sounds like you're saying is, you don't necessarily have to be passionate about the niche or the product even specifically, but you do need to be passionate about understanding that customer base and how they think, and then also in serving that customer. So that means knowing a lot about the product, knowing a lot about what people want out of that product.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You got to do that's you know, Amazon sellers make a lot of mistakes, but that's one of the ones too where they do not understand their customer avatar at all. Um, they kind of like base their listing, their product, their keywords, everything on what they think it is, but not everybody is the same kind of buyer that you are. Like sure, I might type coffin shelf to find a coffin shelf. Another person might type in macabre decor or something, some crazy keyword that you've never even thought about. So you've got to do the customer research.
Yeah, and I haven't, you know, still a lot to learn, but I have enough experience to know that I have seen enough crazy brands and crazy products that, I don't understand them. I don't necessarily fully understand their audience and what drives people behind them, but I do know that, there's people that are passionate about their brand and are willing to pay good money for their products because they see the value in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you don't know your own value prop, then you're gonna have a hard time convincing other people that it's valuable for sure.
So just quick question: how did you end up with coffin shelves? Then was that just what was in Black Box where you saw the opportunity, or?
We documented it in that YouTube. Like I don't remember the exact. I think what it was we were looking up. Maybe the word was we were just like randomly looking on Etsy and Pinterest. That was how we found it, and it was like gothic decor or something like that. Like not exactly coffin shells. And we're just like, hey, what's trending on gothic decor? I think is how it worked because it was around the time of day of the Dia de los Muertos or Halloween or something, right? And so a lot of things were trending. And then we saw a lot of on Pinterest and Etsy, like these coffin shaped shelves. And then we're like, oh, this is interesting. And then we looked on Amazon and then it wasn't there. And so, like, to this day, I think that is a great way of doing product research. Look on websites that are ahead of Amazon, be it TikTok, be it Etsy, be it Pinterest. For a new product to get on Amazon, it has to go through, production and samples, a brand new invention or something. From the time that it's first conceptualized, it might be 6 months before it comes on Amazon. Somebody has a new idea or new invention, it's on Etsy in a week because somebody's making that in their garage or something. It's on Pinterest in a day because somebody's just taking a picture that they saw or an idea or a drawing, they put it on Pinterest. So sometimes these other websites are months ahead of Amazon as far as what's trending, and so it's kind of like a cool way to get ahead of the curve when it comes to Amazon.
Okay. Well, and that transitions really well into the other piece that I wanted to ask you about. So you're doing these recent launches. It sounds like you've launched 4 products recently.
Yeah.
Talk to me about kind of how the launch for these 4 products is similar and different from products that you've launched in the past, and what you're seeing as far as changes as Amazon matures.
Yeah, so what I was known for, even before my Helium 10 days, is you mentioned I launched over 500 products. I would say 400 of them, almost 400 of them, was before I even worked at Helium 10. That was my specialty. I didn't know anything about PPC back then. I didn't know anything about a lot of logistics as far as importing and stuff like a lot of aspects of the Amazon journey in my beginning. I didn't know about. What I became an expert in first was product launches. There was a company out there, Zonblast. I was like one of their biggest customers because I was just doing it for all my customers, and I just loved the whole concept about how I could literally predict easily any kind of launch. 100% success rate as far the products might not have all done well, but success rate in that, hey, customer told me the keyword that they wanted to rank on page 1 for, I'll tell them exactly what I need to do, and it would happen 100% of the time. Whether they stay on page 1, that's not really not up to me. That wasn't what I did. But in those days, when 2-step URLs, search, find, buy was not against terms of service, I loved it. Made my job easy. Then obviously the hammer came down where they finally did put it in terms of service, where they're like, hey, we don't want people using these things. And so now, rebates and stuff like that is all of a sudden against terms of service. So I had to switch my strategy for the last 2 years. But it works almost the same, where it's just using PPC. It's the same concept. Instead of giving away products or offering rebates, I make it at a humongous sale price, like maybe it's 75% off or whatever price I think that people would buy it, who might not have bought it normally, but they just see in the search results, they're like, oh shoot, this product has 0 reviews. I'm not even sure if I needed this product, but $4.99 for this $30 water bottle, sure, I'll give it a try. And then it's basically search find buy without search find buy, because people are searching a keyword, they see my ad, they click on it and they buy it. It's the same exact thing as when we used to use these outside services with two-step URLs and things like that. So that's like the biggest change of like today compared to like 4 years ago, where it's a lot more work because I could just pay a service like Zomblast or AZ Rank and say, hey, I need 20 people a day to buy this if they search for this keyword, and then boom, I'm done. Now it's like I gotta be watching my PPC throughout the day. All right, I got 3 orders today. Let me shut off this target until tomorrow. All right, I need to get 3 orders tomorrow on this keyword. All right, let me, and then I have to be modifying the price and things like that. So it's more of a hassle. But I don't mind it. I think it kind of weeds out the kind of lazy people out there who maybe were just using these kind of services and maybe ranking products that didn't even deserve to be ranked. But now it's like the only way you're going to get to the top is if real people are actually buying your product, from PPC. And so it kind of like evens the playing field, in my opinion, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious on kind of the details of that. So, are you starting with a higher price and then selling a couple of units at that price, so that way Amazon kind of has a reference price and then discounting from there?
Yeah. So the very first day or the very first time I make my listing active, I make sure somebody buys it at whatever is my list price. All right. And then I never change the regular price of it. I either do one of two things. I do a temporary sale price, right, after I have that full price purchase. Or on some situations, what performs better is like a humongous coupon or something like that, where it's like a 50% off coupon or $10 off. Sometimes that works out a little bit better conversion rate. I kind of experiment a little bit. And then it's like once I've gotten the velocity and I think organically I'm going to stick a little bit more, I just start raising that price a little up. I hope that the reviews come in. I actually don't turn on review requests. Helium 10 obviously has follow up where I can automate the request review. It's not necessarily against terms of service to use that, but me just being very careful, since Amazon's very careful with reviews, I don't actively send that request review to anybody I've given a huge discount to, just because I don't even want any notion on Amazon's side that there might be impropriety going on, where it's like, hey, wait a minute, you gave this person 60% off and now you're asking them for a review. It's not 100% against terms of service, but again, I don't want to mess anything with reviews. So I'm not asking for reviews, but some of them are still going to come in, right? And then so I have a few reviews. I'm like, all right, I think I can raise the price a little bit, and basically until I get to what my target price was, and then by that time I've got some reviews, I've got good velocity, people are buying my product, and we're good. We're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're looking at, because I know one of the things for launch, so for example, in Helium 10, and I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's like your CPR, which is essentially like how many units
Yep.
per day you need to
Yep.
sell in order to rank. Do you find that Amazon gives you quote unquote full credit for those sales even if you discounted at 60, 70% off?
Yes. So
Okay.
it's designed to work with this, like the CPR number. I'm actually the one who came up with the formula on it. I mean, not the actual formula. Like I told my data scientists at Helium 10 like exactly what I was doing, and then they came up with, I'm not a mathematician, but where that number came from, the new one, that's like the third version we've done. Manny Coates is the one who made that, the founder of Helium 10 way back when, and then it had a version 2. Now this is a version 3. So what I did was over 6 months, I launched like 40 products, and then it would like kind of like base it off of, all right, well, I am doing discounts or sale price or coupon price, and it doesn't, it doesn't really affect that. Like it still worked exactly the same way. And then the factors that did affect it would be stuff like title density, like how many listings on page 1 have that exact keyword in their title, the age of the listing, The older a listing, the more data it is on it, it's going to take a little bit more. So if it's a brand new listing, there's no official honeymoon period that we call it, but we all call it the honeymoon period.
Right.
It just refers to like Amazon doesn't have enough data on this product, so like any little thing, it has a bigger effect on it and so we call that the honeymoon period. It's not an Amazon term, but if a listing is newer, you might need less units to do because of that effect. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into that formula. But yeah, the number you see there is for like if you're doing full price or if you're doing discounted.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are some great things for people to keep in mind, especially if, maybe you haven't launched a product in a while or you've kind of struggled with some of your launches. I think that gives some really great insights. Was there anything as you were launching these 4 products that kind of surprised you based on your experience that you've had before launching products?
Yes. One thing was I didn't run I didn't even follow my own advice, but I didn't run PickFu on it. So PickFu is something that's been around for a while where you can poll people about, hey, what do you think of this image? What do you think of this price point? And Helium 10 has like PickFu built into it. It's called Helium 10 Audience. But I kind of rushed in the first couple of days. I'm like, man, my click-through rate sucks and everything. I got my pictures and everything professionally done. I use AMZ One Step. They're really good at images. And I love the image. Like they did exactly what I asked them to do. But then I was like, all right, they gave me 3 different white background options. Let me just throw this up in a PickFu poll or Helium 10 audience poll, and let's see what customers saw. And the one that I picked was the worst of the 3. It was like voted on literally 10% or less. It was like not even close. Sometimes like 50. I was like way, way, way off on what I thought was the best picture. And so that just kind of reminded me is like, sometimes we get too much on the algorithms. Oh, my algorithm stuff was all on point. Like I knew my title densities and the relevancy scores that all that stuff. But again, do not forget about the end customer. You are selling to a human being. And I forgot that, I didn't forget it. I was just too lazy, really. But that just was a reminder to me. And it should be a reminder to everybody out there is, yes, have all your ducks in a row on the scientific side and the algorithm side. But at the end of the day, the algorithm, Amazon, they're not your customer. A human being is your customer, and you got to make sure your listing is attractive to them. You got to make sure the right image you've got, showing up. You got to know what the right price point is. So never forget that aspect.
Yeah, and I think what to me was so interesting out of that is that I think we all I think I'm fairly smart. I've seen a lot of things, and I'm sure over 20 years you've seen a lot of things too. And just to go through that process and go, hey, I think this image is the best, and then to put it through, like you said, the Helium 10 audiences or PickFu or something like that, and figure out that your customer base thinks something completely different. And like you said, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are actually going to be buying that product. And so you really have to test, especially important things like your main image, in order to confirm, even if you think that you're right, just to confirm that you're right when you're launching a product or even doing a listing optimization.
100%.
All right. Well, Bradley, we've gone all the way from looking at data and kind of making those decisions, talking about pivots and the other, and then talking about launching new products. What is maybe one piece of advice that you'd have for brands out there that have some traction, but they're really looking at how do I continue to grow my brand on Amazon and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's you got to understand where you should be selling. Don't get too distracted by a million marketplaces or be too scared. Oh my goodness, Temu and Shein and all this stuff and TikTok Shop. TikTok Shop can be absolutely amazing. Like I've seen some ridiculous things where new Amazon sellers do $250,000 in like 3 weeks on TikTok Shop. It can be amazing, but it's not for every product. All right. So Walmart can be great. In general, it could do about 10% of sales on Amazon. Sometimes it could do more than what your Amazon sales. I know people who sell more of the same SKU on Walmart, but it's not for everybody. You might have a product that's not at all, like some luxury brand product, probably not the best for Walmart. So it's like, if you want to keep growing, sure, you got to keep innovating on Amazon itself, like we've talked about. But if you want to grow your brand, pick and choose the right marketplaces to expand to. Don't just do it just because you can. Oh, I'm going to sell on Facebook Marketplace just because I can. No, pick what's right for your brand. Test a little bit at first, and then whatever works well, start doubling down on that. But don't just like spread yourself so thin because you're trying to sell on every single marketplace possible that you know your core marketplaces, you lose focus, and it starts, your core business starts suffering because of that.
All right. Yeah, good advice for sellers out there is, first of all, be willing to test some of those different marketplaces, but you don't need to be everywhere all the time because there's just at this point too many
Yeah.
platforms. So I think that's great for brands to think about where do they fit in that picture. So Bradley, I appreciate all your time today and a lot of things for sellers to take away from this. For people that want to, keep up to date with, these experiments that you're running with the launches and all the other things that you're doing, where are some good places for them to go in order to keep up with all the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so you definitely look at the Helium 10 YouTube channel. Every week I put an episode there where it's called the Weekly Buzz, where I just let everybody know what's going on in the e-commerce world. There's stuff that are all literally every week there's crazy things happening at Amazon, Walmart, and other worlds that sellers need to be aware of. Serious Sellers podcast, obviously on any podcast platform, and then sometimes I have a crazy traveling journeys and stuff that you mentioned. So I document those on my Instagram, so you can just go to Serious Sellers Podcast on Instagram, and 1 week you might see me in Pakistan, the next week in Germany, and who knows where I'll be next.
Very nice. Well, I'll put in a plug, especially for the Weekly Buzz, because I think that's one of the main things that I look at to keep up with what's going on with Amazon and just in the e-commerce world. So you guys do a fantastic job with that.
Thank you.
Bradley, thank you so much for being on the podcast and spending some time with us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.